Welcome to this RSA session. I'm Nicolas Fischbar, the Global CTO at Forcepoint and the VP of SASE Engineering. And I'm joined today by another CTO, Nikolai, and we're going to talk about the new normal in security. What's it going to look like? Last year, we spent some time looking at what 2021 could bring. What are the security trends? And we want to share with you the findings so far, and especially Nikolai was going to introduce himself in a second. He's going to talk about, from his point of view, how is he helping clients apply some of those findings, some of those outcomes to his user base. Nikolai, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
You want to talk a little bit about HelpAG and what you guys are doing?
Yeah,
and,
of course. HelpAG, we're a cybersecurity systems integrator in the Middle East. We deliver services on a number of cybersecurity topics, everything from, of course, your solutions to also a lot of managed services for some of the large clients in the Middle East.
Thank you. So what Nikolai and I are going to do, and you get two CTOs nearly dressed the same way, right? We had to tag team and to align. We're going to talk about, we picked 5 trends. Obviously there's, many more than that, but we picked 5, kind of across the spectrum. Some of them you will see, like the first one is more about user experience and how security and user experience are so critical and kind of, happen, nowadays hand in hand, actually have to happen, hand in hand. The second one, is more about the people, right? Because people are core and center when it comes to security. Not just security and awareness. You will see there's been many other things, and not just because of work from home. I think many of us have been working from home for a year plus now. It looks like the lockdowns are easing in some part of the world, but still some things will remain, and we're going to talk about that. The other macro trend that we've seen, disinformation. It keeps happening. It's probably something at society level, but let's talk about it because it's still impacting businesses day in, day out, using very interesting tricks. And again, Nikolai is going to talk about what some of the things you can do to make sure you stay on the safe side. Finally, and it's linked to the people and disinformation. Insider threats is still a growing concern inside organizations. Also because of the shift to work from home, and also because the bad guys, being in nation states, organized criminals, or just a simple ransomware crews have been using those tricks to drive more insider threat risk. And finally, the last one, you will see it, it's about data. We talked so far a lot about the users, and there's kind of an umbrella theme that we're going to use at the end to recap is where is your data? And I think many of you maybe already found out, right, because of some of the breaches lately and some of the leaks. But data is core and center when it comes to any data protection strategy in organizations. So with that, we'll dive in. I'm going to present more kind of our crystal ball thinking, some of the insights we've been looking at as Forcepoint with X Labs, or research group that has data scientists, cybersecurity researchers, human behavior psychologists, and then Nikolai will share how he has been helping clients apply, protect, defend against some of those findings we're discussing here. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this session, and thanks for being with us. So let's dive in. The first one, the emergence of the Zoom of cybersecurity. Many of us have switched from being in the office, or many of us being on the road all the time, using productivity tools, and Zoom or any collaboration tool has become core and center, for business operations in any organization. And people realize that, whereas, other pieces of technologies have been around for a very long time, look back at, the regular conference calls, voice only, WebExes that have been around for a very long time, people wondered, why did Zoom take off that rapidly? Why did it grow so fast? Well, at the end of the day, it's the user experience on one hand side, and the other hand side is how easy it is to test and buy a security offering, right? So what we're saying here is that cybersecurity has become a business differentiator. It's something you need as part of your business processes, it's not just anymore something that we call, category creation. I think the whole buying cycle, the whole business processes are on testing new tools, adopting new tools, deploying new tools in organizations completely changed. From an end user point of view, the user experience is critical. Users don't want more friction. They want quicker time to value and ease of use. And finally, before I hand over to Nikolai, you will see that this has actually changed the mindset at all levels in organizations. At the user level, at the CISO or CIO level, but also at the exec and the board of director level, because topics like SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, are being discussed at that level. So you see much more business partnership happening on security topics, at board level. And that's kind of all the 3 key items we've decided to really push, into this topic of the Zoom of cybersecurity. Nikolai, what did you guys do about this? How did you help implement, answers to this problem?
Yeah, so there's a number of discussions we have with clients. So first of all, cybersecurity is really one of those things that you need to think out of into any kind of transformation within your organization. I think the last year we've done more discussions about digital transformation and how it impacts organizations than we've done the 10 years before, simply because organizations were pushed to doing that digital transformation due to the situation we're in with the pandemic. And key for that is to make sure that cybersecurity gets thought into that. Because if you don't start off by thinking about how could this impact your organization from a cybersecurity perspective, or which kind of risk there is associated with it, and how do you address those risks, unfortunately, you could become a disruptor of your own business. And that's also not an outcome that you want from that. So that's a little bit linking to what you're saying about the board of directors. I also think that the boards in organizations, they have much, much better security capabilities and understanding about technology today than they've had in the past. And that means that they can make much more educated discussions within the boardroom. And finally, I also have to say that we're involved on those kind of levels to discuss with the boards on what they can do. And that's at least a development that we haven't seen before. Another thing that we are constantly requested by clients is how we deploy and how we also go to market with products and services, where customers, the same way that they're ordering a Zoom subscription, to take that as an example, are also expecting the same kind of buying pattern for cybersecurity products as well. So really subscription-based, service outcome-based solutions. And the same way that you can choose to say, well, this month I'm using Netflix for streaming and next month I'm using Disney Plus. If I'm not happy about the content I'm getting on one streaming service over the other, it's a little bit the same with cybersecurity, that customers want that kind of success. Of course, a lot of that being decided of how good is the service and also what is the user experience from it. Obviously, we talk a lot about cybersecurity and a lot of different kind of vendors. One of the biggest areas that we're looking at it also with clients is, of course, how do we integrate all of this stuff? I think we're blessed with the fact that many of the vendors, they understand that they are living in an ecosystem now, and they're not just in their own little world anymore, which means that we have these rich kind of integration capabilities, whether you call that a platform or SOAR if you're one other vendor, or something else if you're a third vendor. What's key is to make sure that you are able to get information to go from one system to the other.
Perfect. So, this is really becoming real, which is great. Next one, let's kind of not switch gears, right? But, go back to the roots, I'm not going to say the roots of all evil, because for way, way too many years or decades, people kept repeating users are the weakest link, and we want to make sure, saying you and I, having been out in the field, like it is not the case, right? Actually, users are part of, play their role in making security better. Users should be trusted, right? And that's something we want to have a conversation about. Also, like, we spoke about SASE previously, right? There's also this zero trust concept, which is very negative, by definition, right? There is no trust, you have to build trust, when maybe it should be the other way around, right? Trust exists. Employees, most employees are good people, good employees. They want to do the right things for the organization. So that is very important. And what the work from home situation, this kind of new normal, has shown many of us is, and it was kind of predicted, that users cannot take more friction. It is complicated enough to work from home. This home office, which has become like a branch office of one, in a very complex environment, where, you have sometimes the kids working from home, you have shared computers, shared Wi-Fi, you need to print locally, things move off, USB keys again. That is very important. And any security tool, should actually empower users to do better, act like a safety net for them to, to make sure compromission doesn't happen, but also protect company data. And the other thing that, we predicted to be very helpful, kind of building on the active coaching, or coaching in the moment in DLP tools, is that those real-time interactions will help make better decisions. With all the stress, all the noise, all the signals, all the interrupts people keep getting all the time, even sometimes casting the beeps coming in from Outlook, which maybe I forgot to shut down, those real-time interactions, deserve some in-the-moment coaching, because it helps people to stop and think about what they're going to do and maybe not do the wrong thing, right? So this model where we used to do like this legacy DLP approach, where people switch from audit mode to enforcement mode, and the enforcement mode is only either block or allow, is actually blocking the business, right? People don't switch DLP from audit to enforcement mode because of the risks, but also, it's being seen as a wall, by many users. So I think what we were predicting is that something which is more risk adaptive, based on understanding a user poses to company data or company systems at a certain point of time, and adjusting the level of access makes probably more sense. What do you see? Is that, aligned with what you see in the field, Nikolai?
Absolutely. First of all, by blocking, it's an extremely expensive way of doing security, because you're actually inhibiting people from doing what they're supposed to do, which is their job, right? So if you have the capability of getting to a level where you have a much better understanding of what is good and potentially bad behavior or malicious behavior, then you can choose to say, well, I'm going to allow everything that's with good intent, which does not necessarily break my DLP process around some really, really sensitive data in the organization. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we are turning off our DLPs and just, purely trusting our employees to always make the right decision, because there's some governance risk and potentially some compliance around some of the data that you're working with. But it would be really, really nice if we could, in those, let's say, areas where we do not, where we're not required to do these kind of things, that we can make the decision based on the intent of the user. Also, because it's so much easier to do. But I also have to say, it also depends on how do we actually create those processes that our users are working based on. As an example, we had right at the beginning of the pandemic, where everyone was fleeing home to their home offices, we saw in our digital risk protection service, we saw quite a big increase in data loss. And the reason why, it was actually not malicious data loss. It wasn't like people got hacked or anything like that. Maybe some of it was that, but the largest part of it was simply because people had fled to their home offices, had to do their job, and figured out that potentially they couldn't send that large Excel file on the Exchange environment because there was a file limitation, and then they decided to send that on their private email address instead, which caused potentially a data leak. So these are some of the things when we design processes that we need to do it in the right way. And then finally, what we talk a lot with clients about is that you need to assume breach. So you need to assume that one day your systems will not work, that your users will potentially do something that they shouldn't do, or that again, not out of malicious intent, but that something will happen. And if you kind of plan for that breach, you can start to war game, and you can start to think about what would happen if these things happen. And I think assuming breach with all of the changes that we've had in the last year is something we should be spending a little bit more time on.
And you're actually already kind of concluding, right? That's going to be the last point, but a good one. And I think today is, look, people do people things, right? Amazon Prime delivery, I'm just waiting for the kids to run in and the neighbor to start a chainsaw, cut a tree, right? And then we'll have all the people do people things, on the Zoom recording. Next topic, disinformation, right? This has been going on, for quite some time. It's kind of a macro level issue, right? But we also believe it is very specific to what we see in the enterprise. People have been doing this for quite some time. Sometimes it was kind of, handmade, so to speak, to drive, business email compromise, through phishing and other techniques. But, and it's been, at a society, kind of societal level, you look at some of the things that happened, during the election period, right? But the other thing we've seen is that some criminal organizations have turned this into like a service. So you can actually order, send in the data you want, and they're going to produce is the voice recording, the video recording, or something that to help spread this information, or actually trick users to do something. Again, under stress, I think the combination of work from home, the time differences in some organizations, the level of stress, the fact that people don't pay attention on, as much, is still a problem, right? The awareness is much better, right? Because there's been many, many examples. Most of the time, they're actually funny examples, but it's also still very asymmetric. Like many things in security, right? It doesn't take a lot of effort to create, and it can be reused. We've seen that a lot, also driving kind of, crypto lockers and ransomware. I mean, how do you see that? Either kind of, in region, where you operate, Nikolai, with Help AG, or in general? What do people see? How do they react to this? And is that still a real problem?
Yeah. So first of all, it's something that we see at clients across the board, right? Actually, for me personally, this is one of the things I'm the most worried about, being also a citizen in the world, and these kind of things, is this disinformation, deep fake, and all of these things that we're going to start to see being weaponized for real. There's apps on your mobile phone that can do certain parts of this, of course, for fun, right? But it can if you can do it on your mobile phone and it's relatively trustworthy, it's probably quite certain that attackers, they will be weaponizing this very quickly, right? Which, of course, in an enterprise setting can be utilized in phishing scenarios and these kind of things. So I think awareness is really becoming a real business requirement. So that's something that I work with clients around on thinking about how do they do awareness. And I think what we see with awareness programs, they should no longer be a point in time awareness program, but it should really be something where you test and probe and educate your users constantly in that kind of awareness scenario, so that it becomes an ongoing session, also because it's a very, very moving target, what these things are happening. And then finally, I think it's very much a technology created problem, specifically when we're talking about deep fakes and some of the more advanced phishing capabilities. So I think that at some point of time, there'll also need to be some form of electronic or solution for it, right? So I can easily see that as an industry or as a society, that there will be some form of validation service around some of these things. Of course, now I'm talking a little bit outside of the topic of enterprise, but I think the whole way that we think about information and validating sources is important. In the setting of business, and here in the Middle East specifically, we've seen way too many successful attempts of getting people to change account information for suppliers and these kind of things. Low-level stuff that's happening, but it's still successful. And the reason why is because often organizations do not have the right business process in place to make sure that becomes secure.
Right, and that's an interesting point, right? It's just a security technology that needs to solve the problem. Is also business processes needs to start to account for some of those risks, right? Fairly true, right? And that's actually a good lead into the next topic, which is, I think, twofold. It's insider threats, and we've been seeing insider threat becoming more of a problem, during the pandemic and lockdown, just, because the security exposure, security posture, the work environment has changed so much. And things have been, kind of changing here and there and not being, probably controlled in the same way. But also to the second part is it's become like a little bit again, like the disinformation, insider threat as a service, like compromising accounts, compromising people has been something that people have been doing as a service to others, right? So what we're saying here is, really, or what we're expecting is for organizations to rethink where the threats are coming from, right? In this very shifting environment when, I remember having conversations with CIOs and CISOs and CEOs like virtually a year from now that were kind of reinventing the network, reinventing security, reinventing desktops and laptops overnight, over weekends, sometimes on company credit cards, and shifting data from on-prem to the cloud, right? And users, their environment has changed as well, right? I think, people forgot that everybody, and with technologies, we live and breathe this day in, day out, right? But we probably just 1-5% of people that do that all, but everybody else is just a consumer of those, IT and security services, we all offer. And I don't think people really realize, what the psychological and the intellectual impact is on those people, and how do you deal with that? And that's why the second data point here, or the second point here, and the data point here is quite interesting, right? And they are good, but they make mistakes, right? Some of them go rogue. You always have people going rogue because they are flight risk, because of espionage, because they're being compromised. But most of the compromisions, that we were expecting is actually people making mistakes. I mean, I remember some of the data points. We were seeing, I think back in the early days of the pandemic at ForcePoint, or XLabs team was picking 1.5 million of emails per day that were, very sophisticated COVID themed or Office 365, laid out, phishing attempts, right? So people were getting compromised. And the idea here is also that, you revert or you turn the table on insider threat, where the idea is that we as an industry need to help people defend themselves from being compromised and being used and abused because they didn't even know about it. And I think the other topic that I think, Nikolai, you already touched on in one of the previous items is the goal is you could assume breach, but I think the goal should also be as an industry that we are staying left of loss. So rather than trying to address the forensics, the remediation, the mitigations, when you happen to have a breach, aka you are already right of breach, I think the tools, without being in the user's face or without creating more friction, should actually help industries, users, CIOs simplify their toolboxes, have better user experience, and make sure that this risk adaptive approach we've been talking about for quite some time now enables organizations to really stay left of loss. Again, what's your take on that? Is that something you see as well?
Well, breaches are ridiculously expensive to deal with, right? First of all, there can be legal implications, there can be cleanup implications, and all of these things. So, of course, you want to avoid those things happening. And, of course, that's also why we see so much investment going into and efforts going into avoiding those breaches in the first place. But there is fundamental changes that happened in the last year. Obviously, moving back home in the home office, right? Again, I think anyone on this conference, that's on this conference, we've been used to working from at home or from remote and all of these things even before the pandemic happened. But we need to remember that most of our co-workers in our organizations may not have have had that kind of experience. So for them, it was brand new. So this kind of like the hybrid workforce as that has come up. I also think that now as organizations have figured out that working from at home does not maybe really impact the efficiency of the individual, they're going to start speculating much more of how can they actually utilize this even after we have all been vaccinated and the pandemic has been solved. And they might also look into different kind of ways of hiring resources, which means that the association between the employee and the corporation may not be as strong as it used to be, which potentially can lead to some insider threat issues. So I think that's really important. So having the right visibility and being able to create the right view on what that distributed workforce is doing with our data or with data is extremely important as we move forward. And that's really about being able to detect before the loss actually happens. So I think as we have all moved home and are all working in these environments now, hand on heart, I think anyone should maybe revisit if you have that right level of visibility and understanding what's happening with the data, no matter where it is.
Perfect. And this is kind of our summary section, right? It's probably a topic on its own, right? But at the same time, what we talked about here is a lot about the users, a lot about the data. And then at the end of the day, what we want to protect is your data. And one of the predictions, we were making as, kind of Forcepoint X Labs at the end of last year is that, somebody else is probably having a backup of your data, kind of jokingly, so to speak, right? And the tagline we came up with is like, where's your data? You're probably going to find it in 2021. And I think so far, like 4 months in, we've been proven right. There's been so many breaches. There's been supply chain attacks. Look at SolarWinds and others. There's all the ones we don't know about yet. So it is sadly the sad state of affairs, right? I think we didn't have to wait till 2021 to find out. Criminals don't rest, right? The attack surface is still going on. People burn more 0 days. Chain more components to get to the end goal. There's still many breaches happening. Many organizations still don't take security seriously enough, right? We've seen a little bit of everything, right? And it's still full spectrum. We're still investing a lot. People have been doubling down, probably starting last summer in kind of retrofitting security into their work from home plans, right? Making sure that the policies for data protection also get applied to remote devices, that, the remote desktop or the shared environment is better secured. But we've seen everything, right? To from very stupid and basic phishing and ransomware to the full kind of Sunburst, SolarWinds, SolarWinds type attacks, right? So what we're saying is the work from home setups, the changes that have been driven from a digital transformation point of view, so to speak, right? In an organization where applications shifted from on-prem to the cloud, people investing into private access type offerings. And so on, that security posture and that attack surface actually needed to be readdressed, right? And I think the organizations are still in the process. And in the meantime, many organizations, nation states, criminal organizations have spent the time to put, their pins on the board here and there, and are just waiting to probably do more harm. What's your take on that? I mean, what can organizations do about that? Because like we're saying here, it is true that SaaS application consumption has exploded, data has moved, the ownership of the application has moved sometimes from the IT teams to like the business owners, especially look at CRM tools in marketing or customer experience tools. And people at the same time should not forget about infrastructure security. We're not trying to say here that infrastructure security is a thing from the past, right? It's still part of your maturity model. But what we've seen is people finally start to address also the data protection layer, and this needs to be looked at. And before handing over to you, right, for the final comments, Nikolai, I think like you said earlier, the whole orchestration, automation, having better tools, making more sense of the data is also very important, because there's been so much more noise generated by events, by telemetry and so on, that this also needs to be reduced, because you cannot scale your SOC with more people, right? So I think touch on a lot of things here, but what's kind of your take on this? I mean, probably very kind of wide scale, over to you.
Yeah, well, the pandemic was a perfect storm for attackers. I think that's something that we also, from an academic perspective, it has been really, really interesting to observe what happened, right? So everything from the phishing emails that were themed that way and hitting the soft underbelly of people working from at home. Obviously it was fantastic for the attackers to have all of these themes. And these themes are, by the way, playing out still, right? Right now it's phishing campaigns around vaccination that's happening. And you need to remember that users in their home office has a very, very different behavior than they have in the office. So this really means that you need to reconsider how you do on-prem security versus what you do when people are working from home. You also need to revisit, how do you think about SaaS security, right? In the sense that that's a whole new topic for certain organizations as they start to utilize that. Also remember, SaaS organizations or companies that delivering SaaS services are also targets in this big cybersecurity challenge that we're having. And now I'm not talking about the big ones, but if you're buying a small SaaS service, you need to evaluate if that specific SaaS service is secured in a way that you can accept for the data that you're going to put into it. So that's also a new challenge for organizations as they move into cloud. One low-level thing which I think we haven't done enough with, an organization haven't done enough with, is really assessing how your endpoints are going to do against what I would call normal attack scenarios. So really performing an assessment of the security robustness of the endpoints. That's something that many organizations could benefit from. We generally, when we do these kind of services, are able to break through the systems. It's really only a question of effort. But the outcome of that is that organizations can fix those specific issues that we or scenarios that we played out on the environment. It's also about understanding where the user is sitting, right? So it may not be appropriate that they do everything at all locations. It may not be appropriate that they do everything or have access to all data at any location that they're working at. So that's also an element that I think is very important, that you create policies that can follow the user and follow the location of the user. And then maybe a final thing, a call to action, if you haven't done this already, is to think about which kind of visibility you have in this new paradigm. Because if you haven't got visibility, you're also not really going to catch what's going to happen out there. And you have to understand the fact that where your security used to be maybe centralized in a couple of locations where the users were sitting and you had your centralized firewalls and proxies and these kind of things to look at, now the users potentially are everywhere. And how do you deal with creating that kind of visibility layer?
True. Thank you. I think super insightful. I hope, you in the audience, enjoyed the conversation between Nikolai and I. I think we are kind of proven right, to summarize on some of those insights. So the crystal ball is always a risk, right? But I think, what Nikolai shared with us, his field experience, what he has implemented in clients, resonates with you. It's going to help you make your environment better, make the user experience better for your users, make your data more safe, make your infrastructure more resilient. With that, Nikolai, let me hand over back to you for maybe one last final statement or recommendation to the audience before maybe we open to Q&A.
Yeah, not much more for me to say here, apart from the fact that I think we should all utilize the time, and also the fact that we don't have to necessarily be physically present. I'm really looking forward to being able to travel again and be able to go to events. I think there's a lot of benefits, and also meeting face to face with industry professionals. So next year, I hope that it's going to be face to face instead.
I agree. I think we're all missing the face to face networking and all the cool chats, right?
Exactly.
Thank you all. Thank you for attending.